join us. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are on this globe. Thank you very much for your time and for joining us on today's SkyConnect. As you would have noticed on our notification that we sent out inviting you to this event, our guest today is no other than the former Director General of the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority, Capt.Gilbert Kibe. And in today's session, Captain Kibe would be helping us to better understand some aspects of our industry. And as I would actually dig deeper with him into aspects of implementing the single African air transport market, of which he is a keen enthusiast. Before he left the Civil Aviation Authority and even today. So we would be looking at also the state of the industry, and we'll be looking at the cost and connectivity, among other issues on today's session. As in previous sessions, ladies and gentlemen, you will be invited to participate in the discussions on. And I would encourage all of you to use the Q&A tab to actually post any questions or comments you may have, and at the appropriate time, I will access them and ask our guests to respond to you accordingly. So without much ado, I want to thank you all for staying with us, and I wish you an enjoyable session and a very activated session this day. So we get started. Captain, probably before we get into the substance of our discussion today, I want you to probably tell us a bit more about yourself. I know you left the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority, but you are up to many other things in the aviation industry, and we might want to be kept abreast with what keeps you busy after you left KCAA. Thank you, Captain. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Raphael. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this Africa SkyConnect dialogue. Indeed, I'm truly honored that you have done so. So thank you, Raphael, and the Secretary General of AFRA, and all those who are responsible for organizing this event. So it gives me great pleasure to be here. Let me start by saying that after I left the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority, I immediately embarked on a private business that I have been doing with my family. So that I do, although I have been made or appointed the chairman of our family business enterprise. So that is something that I've been doing at board level. Also, I have created a consultancy company known as Air Transport Consulting. And so I'm waiting to get contracts with aviation stakeholders where they would require my skills in advising them and on a consultancy basis on aviation matters. Thirdly, about a month after I left, the President of Kenya appointed me the chairman of the Communications Authority of Kenya. So, which is funny because I was a regulator of the air. Now I am regulator of the airwaves, as Communications Authority is dealing with regulatory matters concerning mobile telephony, radio, TV, postal corporation, internet, etc. So I'm still in a regulatory regime, but a totally different industry, but somehow related. So Rafa, that's what I'm doing right now, and it keeps me busy. There are times when I'm even busier than I was as the Director General. So it's good fun, and I'm enjoying myself. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Then I thought at retirement, I can see that even though you are retired, but you are not tired.
That's correct.
And other
Still
things
willing
that
to
are
serve.
keeping. Yes, thank you so
Still
much.
willing to serve. Yeah.
We really appreciate that you still set up a consultancy and want to continue to be engaged in the air transport sector, and we are grateful about that. Oftentimes, many people, once they leave the industry, they just go into oblivion. But I'm happy that you want to share your knowledge, your experience, your expertise with this industry and move us to the next level. Thank you. Now, let's get into the subject of it. You left during when we were all working hard together trying to move this industry out of COVID.
Yes. We
are not out of the wood entirely yet, but at least significant progress have been made. The last AFRA statistics or operation statistics tracker I saw indicates that the industry has recovered nearly 80% to pre-COVID levels in Africa, which is a very significant achievement. And we are hoping that COVID will not reverse, but will continue to disappear on us, and we have things moving forward. But what is your own assessment of the COVID situation and the impact it has had on African aviation?
The pandemic brought a situation that aviation globally has never seen. The traffic levels went down drastically, even as much as in Kenya, 94% our air traffic slowed down. You remember in March of 2020, that's when we decided to close our airspace in Kenya. I was the DG at that time. And the month of April saw a reduction of 94% of our air transport or traffic movement in and out of our country. And it is similar to what happened globally. So it was the most devastating effect that it had on aviation, but also in economies of all countries globally. So that is something that we would not want to see happen, but it did have what you can call a silver lining. We had to reset ourselves globally in the way that we saw the growth and development of the economies of our different nations, and also in the way our airlines would operate from that point where it started to improve going forward. And as you have said, around 80% of air transport movement is at the 2019 level. And for me, I see this is an excellent opportunity. We are growing and we're going to go to a new level. So I don't see it as going back to 2019. I look at it as we're starting fresh, a reset from zero. So every improvement is an increase in growth and development of aviation. And for me, I see a very bright future ahead. But there are still some challenges that we need to face.
Wow. But now to reset, it's actually important that we are in a reset mode. But yes, can we say that the market is also ready for a reset? Have we gingered the market enough? Will there be enough traffic going forward to warrant the operations that we are planning?
Well, the statistics that we see is that there's growth in the aviation industry globally, and I see that continuing. But there's still some areas. I think mentally and operationally, we have changed the way we do things, and when we're actually implementing those changes that are required. But there's still some challenges that are remaining. You know, I was looking at the Africa Development Bank latest report on Africa and its economies. And what it is saying is that one of the major challenges that we are facing still is the persistence of the COVID-19 pandemic. You know, we are seeing as if the pandemic is over, but Raphael, it isn't over. Cases are still there. New variants are coming. So it is still a challenge that we will have to face and to overcome. Now, how are we going to overcome that? It is very simple. We need more vaccinations. You know, people have relaxed on the vaccination implementation, which is unfortunate because everybody thinks that COVID is dead, but it's not. So we need to encourage our African states to increase and up their vaccination status of their citizens. In that way, we will be able to experience greater growth and development in aviation. Of course, the other thing that is not helping is the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Being major trading partners with the rest of the world, sanctions on Russia, lower productivity on agricultural. The interesting thing is Ukraine and Russia are a very big percentage of agricultural production globally, and they export around the world. But because of this conflict, you have all noted that it is operating suboptimally. So not enough produce is being exported, and therefore situations of food shortage are real and they're happening today. So Raphael, we still have a way to go before we can say that we are out of the woods.
Wow. Now, on the vaccination, we have indeed slowed significantly. The last time I was looking at Africa CDC statistics, on average in Africa, we have done about 28% of our citizens have had at least one vaccine. For both those who have had two vaccines, we're looking at 15%. The one vaccine, we're looking at 28%. This compares unfavorably to the global average of 68%.
Yes.
Vaccinated people who have been vaccinated around the world. So it is indeed true. But how can we get our people to accept to be vaccinated? It's been a battle for our states.
You know, convincing people is a very difficult thing. When they see that people are not dying from COVID, they've stopped hearing about COVID-related deaths, although they are still there. They just believe that there is no pandemic anymore. So it's a major challenge, in particular for the health authorities in Africa, to convince their citizens to go and be vaccinated. You know, one wonders, what do you need to be told for you to obey good advice from your government? Raphael, I really don't know. I struggle with it all the time. You know, I was involved in Kenya with the Ministry of Health, where the president had set up the Emergency Response Committee on Coronavirus in the very early times of the virus, so that we could sit together multidisciplinary ministries, health, finance, transport, foreign affairs, agriculture, and others. We sat together and came up with the protocols that were required to reduce the spread of coronavirus. This was in early 2020. So we kept on reporting to the public the rates of transmission, the hospitalizations, and the deaths. But when we now started reporting fewer than 5% transmission rate, everybody relaxed. And of course, we had to relax the rules and restrictions that the coronavirus brought, including in all our different industries, air transport, in hospitality, tourism, etc. So when you find that you relax these restrictions, then people forget about the vaccine and they believe that they don't need to do it. I know many people myself who have only done one. I don't know of any personally who hasn't done a vaccine, but I know of some who have only done one, and they refuse to go for the second. I know many who have done 2 vaccines and have completely refused to go for the booster. So with that kind of an attitude that it is not critical anymore, it's not life-threatening, there's no interest in the vaccine. So the governments really have to come up with ways to try and convince us people to just go and do what is right. Because when we are above 60, 70% vaccinated, then we're talking about the real growth and development of the economies globally, and especially here in Africa. And that will also include the growth and development of air transport in Africa, which is our primary interest.
Now, specifically with regards to our industry, we see some mixed signals regarding health and COVID protocols at the airport. Today, when you are traveling at the airport, no one insists that you wear masks in most cases. In most of the airports, it's no longer mandatory. But the moment you are at the boarding gate and they says, we are boarding now, they equally announce, please wear your mask before you board. Now, so I'm not too sure whether that is the right protocol or there's something not right there. What do you think?
We are inconsistent with COVID prevention measures, and that is very, very true. So whereas you still find signs everywhere, when you get to an airport, wear your mask, you find that a huge percentage of people are not wearing their masks. And the authorities at the airports, like the port health authorities, are not insisting to people to wear the mask. It is only the airlines that are telling you that you must wear your mask. And of course, people do put on the mask. But hey, guess what? When you enter the aircraft, everybody removes their masks. And the cabin crew do not tell you to put on your mask. Or even if they do, after a while, when you're airborne and you're in cruise, people remove their masks and then people continue as per normal. However, on board an aeroplane, the spread of coronavirus is not a concern because with the HEPA filters on board, over 99% of viruses are cleared or killed and cannot come and infect a person. And of course, even if there was a virus and you're vaccinated, your chance of getting ill or sick are very, very minimal. I cannot say that it's 100% confirmed that you won't get it. So this inconsistency in application of COVID restrictions is what is stopping us from wearing masks. But however, because the infection rates have gone down so much, should we insist on coronavirus protective measures like masks? I think that's a good question. There may not be, but still, we need to get people to be vaccinated. I think that is the most important thing. Yeah.
I think if we can get people vaccinated and we are not even insisting on the other protocols, at least then people to some extent have an immunity that can help them with this. But now, yeah, if we shift a bit to look at this in our industry and the growth we have seen so far and the anticipated growth. Now, our part of the world, this growth also comes with some significant cost that we have always found very difficult to deal with. With the Russia-Ukrainian war, we see that fuel prices are getting off the roof and airlines are in trouble. But besides that, we see other self-inflicted costs, in my view, that are coming from internal governments or other sources that are also impacting the growth of air transport. Now, how do we deal with these cost-related issues so that our aviation industry can really grow at the pace and at the rate we anticipate it to?
Raphael, in Africa, our governments have not taken on the attitude of air transport growth and development as the #1 economic enabler for all countries. They have not fully understood that. Why is that? Maybe you and I and the rest of us in the air transport industry have not made a good enough effort to sensitize our governments of the features and benefits of air transport. So when we are seeing taxes raised and they are high, you understand that the government does not believe that air transport is something that should be, whose cost should be reduced. They look at the taxes as an income stream for their governments. So at the point where we'll be able to convince our governments that if you reduce the costs of air transport, aviation grows, the economy of all states will grow. You and I, and all of us in the air transport industry, led by AFRA and what we have been doing, and IATA and all the other global bodies, we need to jointly convince our governments to reduce the cost of air transport as an enabler of their economies. Once they have understood that, then we shall begin to see real growth and development of aviation.
But whilst governments might still be yet to come to terms with the reality of make air transport accessible and affordable so that you can uplift other sectors of the economy, we also have this situation where oftentimes cost of destinations, access to destinations becomes an additional burden. The other day, I was just reading about an African traveling to who traveled to another African country and wanted visa on arrival, and he could only get visa on arrival at $150 US. And the passenger was alarmed that an African went to Africa having to pay $150. In contrast, we have some non-African countries whose citizens can get visa free, or they don't even need the visa at all to come to Africa. What are we doing about to ourselves as Africans?
Raphael, that's a very difficult question to answer because I have never understood it. We are Africans, we live in Africa, and we want to move among African states. Why are we penalized to move, and yet we're the same Africans from the same continent? People from other continents can come visa-free or no visa. I have never really understood what the problem is. And if the idea is to have a revenue stream for governments by charging visa fees, then it should not be Africans who are charged the visa fees because we are still poor. We are still low income countries. So why should we, who are less well off, pay more than a foreigner just to visit another state? So I think that is something that none of us have ever understood. And it goes back to what I'm saying. The governments are not sensitized enough to understand the features and benefits of making it easier for the movement of persons and goods among us. You know, Raphael, at the end of the day, Africa is going to grow itself. It's going to develop itself. We will not be able to rely on foreign aid or foreign trade for the growth and development of Africa. If we trade among ourselves as Africans, we go Pan-African, I believe that is the future of Africa. And then we'll still continue trading with the rest of the world, but we will become better off. So let's find a way of promoting and implementing a visa-free status for all Africans flying in Africa. It should be free of charge. You should be able to enter in and out of any African country without the need for a visa. And if you need a visa, that visa should be free and it should be available on arrival without any problem. So yeah, we still have a challenge, Raphael. We need to overcome that.
Yeah, indeed, we do have a challenge, and it's a bit of a contradiction. Whilst our leaders are pushing for us to have a free continental trade area, we are seeing some blockages to this free trade environment. Again, we are pushing for a single African air transport market, but alongside, then we are putting impediments that can actually slow down the realization of the growth of the traffic and trade across Africa. So it's quite a difficult dynamic that we find ourselves in, and probably we might need to continue engagements with the African Union Commission to see how best we can align policies across the continent to make this feasible. But having said that, I was just reading the other day that intra-Africa trade is about 17% of Africa's global trades. In Asia, intra-Asia trade is about 60% of their global trade. And in Europe, intra-European trade is about 70% of the European global trade. Now, 17% in Africa. We're talking about a free continental trade area. Now, what else should we be doing to enable us push up the trade volumes on the continent?
To implement the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement requires states to sign trade agreements among them. In those trade agreements, come up with tariffs on customs and other taxes, etc., which are favorable to Africans. So the cost of doing business among Africans should be reduced as much as is possible. Trade among us in Africa, Pan-African trade, like I said earlier, is going to be the key to the growth and development of our economies as Africa. And then when we are working together as one unit as Africans, then we'll be able to negotiate better trade agreements with other foreign states. Rafael, we're back to this thing. How do we sensitize governments to create enabling environments through the Africa Continental Free Trade Area? So reduce tariffs, taxes, and other impediments to the growth and development of the trade among us. Then when we go to the single Africa air transport market, reduce the cost of that air transport among ourselves, among the African carriers, to promote free access for people, services, goods, and all the kinds of trades that we can do together. It is only by doing this together that we will succeed. So let's try and jointly, as all the stakeholders, sit with our governments and explain to them the benefits of these agreements that we have. The Africa Union, through these two programs, Africa Continental Free Trade Area and the Single Africa Air Transport Market, have given us the blueprint for our growth and development of Africa as a whole. Can we implement it? We're the ones who came up with it. All we need to do is implement these programs under Agenda 2063 of the African Union. So it is taking time. So I don't know whether it is evolution, time. It takes time for things to change in our human growth and development. So perhaps it is just a matter of time. A right time will come when everybody will understand the benefits of these things. But we're very busy thinking about what is in it for me, and will I be disadvantaged if I make it easier to trade with my neighbor or my neighbors? Perhaps we bring it down to a simple level like that and come and explain the benefit in a simple format that is easy to understand, that we can convince our governments to do what is right, what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. Now, DG, if I may just get now into a bit of the single African air transport market space. I know you have been a very, very strong advocate of a single African air transport market. And during your time, you have pushed very hard. You have encouraged your colleagues across the divide to make sure this became a reality. Now that we have gotten certain regulatory text now fully in place, what else needs to be done so that we can fast track the pace?
Very simple. So out of the 54 African states, is it 35 that have signed the solemn commitment for the implementation of SATAM? It's only about 10 states who claim that they're already implementing SATAM. I'm still trying to investigate what impact those 10 states have had among themselves. Unfortunately, I don't have the data on that. But how do we implement it? What we need to do simply is to implement SATAM. Now, how are we going to implement SATAM? Because it sounds like when you read the concept of SATAM is that the whole of Africa will become one sky airspace for African carriers. Now, that concept sounds very nice and very simple. We just change one day and just become an open sky. But what does open sky mean? Perhaps not many of us knows what that means, or even how it can be implemented. For me, having thought about it, the easiest or the where to start in implementation of SATAM, One Sky policy, is to use the regional economic community approach, the RECs. I'll give an example. Here in East Africa, we have the East African Community. We used to be 5 states, then became 6. Now we're 7 states, including the DRC. We have a common market of more than 300 million people in our population. So how do we implement SATAM in EAC? I say, make all the 7 states domestic airspace. So they are no longer international. What does that mean? For you to take a flight from Nairobi to Entebbe in Uganda, part of your ticket cost is $50 air passenger service charge. What is the air passenger service charge on a domestic flight? I'll give an example of Kenya. It's $5. So if we changed to domestic airspace for EAC, the passenger service charge will become $5 instead of $50. That's already a huge saving. Then we decide that we're going to reduce the taxes that are levied on aviation-related products and services. Look at fuel. Reduce the taxation on fuel. Have no taxation on spare parts, etc., for aeroplanes. Reduce the cost of every aspect of aviation, including overflight fees that are charged by air navigation service providers, so that we can look at the reality of a ticket which is costing me $400 today, or even I'll be going to Kigali over the weekend for Aviation Africa conference. My economy class ticket is $600. What if that ticket was $200? Imagine how much more movement of people between Kenya and Rwanda would be. And if we spread that around the whole of the EAC partner states, where you have $100 tickets, $200 tickets, it will have the effect or the impact of exponential growth in the movement of persons. So what does that mean? It means that the airline will now be able to have higher loads and charge a lower fare, because when you note, the airline fare itself is not that high. It's the taxes that go with it. In some cases, over 60% or 100% of the cost of that ticket are taxes. So you can actually reduce the cost of a ticket from 600 to 200. And in nearer places, it can reduce to even $100. So when you have that kind of movement, the volumes will be immense. Let me give you an example of how that has actually worked in EAC. A few years ago, there were the 4 partner states of Uganda, Rwanda, South Sudan, and Kenya decided to make the mobile telephony calling rates change from 90 Kenya shillings at the time to 4 shillings. That was like a 90% drop in the tariff or the cost of a mobile call between the partner states. So they made the mobile call domestic regardless of where you were in EAC. So you fly to Dar es Salaam or to, okay, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania was not there. You could fly to Rwanda, make calls among the people you're talking to there in Rwanda, and also call home for the same cost as it would cost you to do this, to make that call in Kenya. In the first couple of months, the mobile telephony traffic grew by 400%. And thereafter, it even went to beyond 1,000% as the months moved on. Whereas there was a fear that the revenue generated would be much less, the revenue actually generated was exponentially much more. And today, all mobile telephony operators who have this arrangement have forgotten about what it used to be before. The revenue they earn is quantums more than they ever did. That is a practical example. So if we could go around and sensitize governments and give practical examples such as that, then they are more likely to believe that it is possible that air transport, we can achieve the $100 ticket among us. So on a regional economic community basis, we create domestic airspace for the 6-7 partner states. Once we are implementing that, we are seeing the benefits of it, and everybody is convinced, then EAC can now go to SADC. And at the same time, we're hoping that SADC will do the same. We're hoping that ECOWAS will do the same, make their own partner states domestic. Then there's also COMESA and any of those regional economic communities. If they begin implementing SATAM, that their partner states are domestic, then now we can have agreements between RECs, the EAC and SADC, the EAC and ECOWAS, the EAC and COMESA, and the EAC and the northern guys. When all that happens and is being implemented, before you know it, all of Africa will be one open sky, a true open sky where all of Africa is domestic. And we're having affordable ticket prices to fly anywhere that you need to go. And we will stop this movement of going from one African state to another, passing via Europe or the Middle East. We will create our new air traffic and our new forms of airlines that will start to operate. And there, Raphael, we will now have the model that will make this successful in the way that Europe became successful after regulation, deregulation, the low-cost carrier, the true low-cost carrier of Africans will begin. So it will not just be the state carriers, the national carriers, but will create a new revenue stream for low-cost carriers to be able to enjoy the benefits of a domestic market across Africa. Sounds simple, implementation is difficult, but it is doable.
It's doable. Like, I'm very, very excited about the analysis you have given so far and the example from the telecom sector and how, if we replicate that module, how it's going to transform African aviation. But admittedly, SATAM implementation as presently structured is sort of not built around the regs. It sort of looks like everybody, you sign a solemn commitment, then there's a memorandum of implementation, then there are the concrete measures, and once you have done that, you are done, irrespective of which regs you are. But I think there's probably a need for us to probably relook at it along the regs angle. But my question is, how do we get about getting SATAM modeled around the regs? Would it be an advocacy through the regs? Would it be an advocacy through AFCAC or through the AUC? How can we get this done?
I think it begins with the AUC. The two programs you mentioned, the SATAM and the Afro-Continental Free Trade Areas, are AUC programs. So it is incumbent upon the AUC during the heads of state and government meetings to come up with resolutions that bind the heads of states and government of all the AU partner states to implement SATAM and use the regs as the mode of implementation, slowly by slowly, because I don't think it will be possible to do all of Africa at the same time. But if we do it in bits and pieces, bite size, a reg is a bite size of implementation. So at that high level, AU level, then to make governments commit to actually implementing using the regs, then AFRA and the other stakeholders also get together to assist the governments with coming up with programs of how it can be implemented. And so the governments will now listen or be forced to listen to what the stakeholders are saying. Reduce the cost of air transport, reduce taxes on fuel, on all aviation related matters. And the benefit for you will be the economic growth of your state and your reg. So it needs that high level, I think, directive or resolution for all African states to be able to do that and use the stakeholders led by AFCAC, which is the implementation agency for SATAM. And of course, to use the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat as well, talking together and telling each state, this is how you need to implement this. And we as the business people and the stakeholders, we will make this happen and we'll report to you at regular intervals the actual benefit that you are deriving from that implementation. So from high level cascading down to the operational level, I believe that is the way it will go.
DJ, but even within the regs at the implementation level, there has always been this perception that the airlines are part of the problem of liberalizing Africa and not the solution. That oftentimes state-owned airlines that are struggling to make ends meet frustrate other airlines from operating in their markets with the excuse that if they open up their markets, they will die. Now, how do we deal with this issue about airlines trying to muzzle up pressure on their governments not to yield to open markets, even at the Rex level?
Yeah, it's very unfortunate that even some airlines have not really fully understood the benefit of implementing SATAM. And they have this notion or this perception that if we allow an open sky, I will be at a disadvantage. But nothing can be further from the truth. Those states that have state or national carriers are the ones who will have the largest benefit, single largest benefit of the implementation of SATAM. So we need to change the mindset of the airline executives who believe that implementation of SATAM will be disadvantageous to them. It will actually be advantageous to them, and we encourage them to actually do it. And even on top of that, I would recommend to go further and state that airlines should form alliances and partnerships with their competitors. So in your rec, in the EAC, we have Kenya Airways, Air Tanzania, Uganda Airlines, Rwandair, and soon there'll be the other partner states are also talking about creating their own airlines. Form an alliance, have joint, or rather program, coordinate your networks to create connectivity among all the routes that you are operating into. So that with that alliance, all those partner airlines will benefit with increased growth in traffic. And in the areas where you are not able to provide a service, allow your neighboring airline to provide that service if it is within the economic model for them to do so. So let us take a pragmatic approach to how we will work together as airlines. We have to, because we have seen alliances the way airlines have become truly global. When you look at the three airline alliances globally, the Sky Team, the Star Alliance, One World Alliance, these are partnerships of airlines. These airlines, some of them are even direct competitors of each other, and yet they're in the same alliance. In Africa, let's create our own alliance network and coordinate our networks and schedules and routes so that we can make it easy for people to move between states. And in particular, create that service that will not make an African leave Africa to go to another African state. Extremely important. So let's look at our airlines not as competitors, but as partners, providing a service that is of benefit to both parties. So it's a change of mindset, and it's based on fact. The examples are there, so many around the world. Why don't we do it ourselves as Africans? Let's give it a try. I strongly believe it will work. Alliances among our airlines, and then we together we're talking with our governments to reduce the cost of this air transport, and we shall gain revenues and growth and development of aviation in Africa like we won't believe.
Oh, DG, I'm flabbergasted. This is really the way to go, and it ought to be. I mean, we have no other option if we need to be successful. It's just unfortunate that we mistrust each other and we misunderstand each other, and we like to play the winner take all game. We don't want to share in good times and in bad, but we want, once things are going well, we should be able to do. But talking about these partnerships, if we have to get into partnership, the one thing that is always brought up as a limiting factor is the different service levels provided by different operators. That I know my competitor is always late. No, I'm almost always punctual. I don't want us to have a partnership. Then his image impacts my image and blurs it off. Now, so I think, first of all, we probably might need to do something about the service level, to up the service level of the airlines. But this problem might also be difficult if we don't seem to have the resources, which is what most of these airlines lack. Most of them are undercapitalized. And so they don't have the right level of equipment to be able to compete effectively. So it's a bit difficult. I'm not too sure. How do we start to bring about an alliance in an environment where we have these varied levels of service fulfillment?
You who has an airline that is profitable, reasonably making money, get into an alliance with me is struggling. We get into an agreement where we can have joint purchases of fuel, spare parts, and other aviation-related services to drive the cost down for me to be able to offer the services. And when our alliance is working and our revenues are increasing, my airline will begin to start making money, and then thereafter be able to provide the service offering that you are talking about. Now, in terms of actual service, in-flight service, etc., in your agreement, you can agree that this is the standard that we will have so that our service levels are seamless, as close as possible together. But now for the more complex and more expensive things, for instance, getting the more suitable new aircraft, we need to be together so that we can make joint purchases of that. And the most economic way of travel of aircraft is to use new generation aircraft, because the cost per seat mile are much less. But if you can't afford, under a joint purchase scheme, a joint lease or lease purchase scheme between your partner as your other airline, which is your neighbor, it will become more affordable, so that this notion of Africa only operating old aircraft will soon disappear. It will disappear because you are making money under the strategic alliances that you have created with your African partners. So when we are together, we are able to go far. When we are alone, we go nowhere. And I see that very, very seriously, and we have to understand that. So that our neighbor is not an enemy. It's a friend, it's a partner, a reliable partner that is going to drive down the cost of my operation and make my service better together with yours, so that Africans' aviation services are world-class all around.
Wow, we go together, then we are stronger. We go alone, then we dissipate our efforts. I like that. DG, now tell me, we are beginning to see, with SATAM coming on stage, some countries who had no airlines before now trying to come up with airlines, because nobody wants to be outdone. So we are seeing new airlines coming up, or plans to come up with new airlines in the offing across Africa. Do all the 55 countries in Africa really need airlines of their own?
No, they don't. The ones that don't have.
How can they get the full benefit of air transport if they don't have their own airline? That is the thinking.
It's very simple. Those states that don't have their own airlines obviously don't have a business case to have one. Therefore, allow your African partners to come and operate in your state as if they were your national carrier and allow them to do the routes and services that if they had their own airline would be able to do. So that is not a new thing. That is something that happens in many places across the globe. If you don't have your own airline, just allow people to come in and start operating in and out of your state. You will still get the benefit. You will still get the income that is derived from the aviation or the air transport sector. So I don't see that as an issue. I don't think that African states should get or establish their own airline if it is not economically viable to do so. Because I don't agree that it makes sense to do so. Just form partnerships with your neighbors and provide the services in and out of your state as if you had your own carrier. But again, those states will still insist that they want to start their own airlines. But then in this case, then even if they do, they should consider an alliance immediately with their neighboring states or another African carrier, so that they can enjoy the benefit of scale and the benefits that come from the different agreements, joint purchasing, etc., to reduce the cost of that air transport. So you cannot stop a state from wanting to establish its own carrier, but you can advise them that they should do that in partnership with others. And where I see that it makes sense, instead of having a large national legacy carrier, why don't you just, as all these African partner states, why don't you just form low-cost carriers? They could be yours, or they could be your neighbors, allowing them to go in and out, but use the low-cost carrier model. And that is what is going to really bring the growth. I mean, how do you explain, Rafael, when Europe deregulated over 20 years ago, you recall the legacy carriers of the time, British Airways, Air France, Lufthansa, all those major carriers in Europe, were protesting deregulation. But what was the benefit of deregulation? Well, Ryanair started, EasyJet started, and all these other low-cost carriers started. Now, at that time, these guys who were crying foul, the major carriers, they had like 100 airplanes each, 150 airplanes each, the legacy carriers. But what do those same legacy carriers have in terms of fleet numbers? They have 200, 250, nearly 300 airplanes. How did that happen? It was the benefit of deregulation. But then what happened to Ryanair? They started with 50, then 100, 200. Today, they have 350, 400 airplanes with another 400 on order. They're double the size of the legacy carriers, but the legacy carriers have grown and they're making money. And so have the low-cost carriers as well. So what they have done is brought a whole new range of travelers that didn't exist before. You still have the $50 ticket in Europe today, $50, $100. There's a benefit for all. There should be no fear from even our major carriers or our governments.
Well, sincerely, our countries should have no fears. Our operators should have no reservations. The market is big enough. Africa is 1.3 billion people, and Africans travel a lot. If the fares were affordable, Africans could even travel much, much more. But at this point, let me just go to our audience and pick some questions that have come up. I see that Brian Ginga says, why is SATAM taking too long to be implemented? Brian, I think you've got the answer to this whilst we were discussing SATAM. So it's a bit complicated, but we are working on it, and sooner or later we get it. The second question is from Waturi Matu, and he says the REC approach is sound. However, partner states seem unable to build consensus on the implementation of open skies. How then can we carry indecisive partner states? DG, how can we carry those states who have very strong reservations about this?
Yeah, I think we've discussed it in our discussions. We need to sensitize those indecisive partner states, give examples of success that has been seen elsewhere. Give them that example of telecom companies getting together to reduce the cost of mobile telephone calls. Look for other examples. Look at just Europe itself. We've been talking about Europe and its deregulation and the impact it had. The legacy carriers grew. The new entrants, the low-cost carriers, grew like unbelievably, and they're still growing today. We need to keep talking to our partners and tell them this is how it is going to work, and until we convince them. So some will take longer than others, but as long as at the end of the day, they will agree and accept to give it a try. After all, if something doesn't work, then you cancel it.
That's right.
The worst thing you can do is not do anything about it. Not make any effort. Yeah. That's how I would answer that.
Yeah, in fact, Waturi continues. He says he himself is a very strong advocate of open sky policy in EAC. However, it doesn't seem to be a priority. In spite of the private sector lobbies, how can we keep this important matter on top of the agenda? Even studies on benefits fall on deaf ears. How can we keep this active?
Very true. We must keep active. We must persist and persist and persist until they get it. And that's what I was thinking. If we could get a form of directive or resolution at high level at these African Union Commission meetings where they meet, to make it a priority, a resolution that each partner state must begin to implement, and work together with all the stakeholders to continue listening to the benefits and the features of SATAM. Eventually they'll make it. So we just have to persist. Otherwise, we can't really think of any other better examples to give other than what we have already seen globally that is happening with deregulated or open sky policy states.
Thank you very much, DG. Now, we've completely run out of time, but before I let you go, I think there's one more question. Oh, sorry, no, it's just a clarification for my information. Is Miss Waturi, because I had said Mr. I think Miss Waturi.
Okay.
Sorry about that, Madam. My apologies. Yeah. Now, DG, before I let you go, can I ask you for your final word, your final thought for the African aviation stakeholders?
To the stakeholders of air transport in Africa, the airlines, air operators, air navigation service providers, ground handling agents, catering, airports authorities, security organs, all of you in the ecosystem of aviation, let us change our mindset on how we look at air transport. Air transport is the single largest enabler of economic development of all nations worldwide, and that is just a fact. So why don't you play your part in participating to help the growth and development of aviation in all the different areas where you are participating in. The airlines, get into the partnerships that I'm talking about, get into alliances, joint purchase agreements, get to reduce the cost of operation. Government, reduce your taxes, even if it's to the point of 90%, you are not losing. The loss in the quantum dollar that you are losing today, tomorrow will be 1,000 times more than you have had before. And that is just the fact, and that is the way it is. May I encourage each and every one of you to think SATAM, think Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Africa will build itself through Pan-African travel for tourism and trade. That is a concept that I thought of the other day. Pan-African travel for tourism and trade. Travel is air transport. Tourism is obvious. And trade is where the Continental Free Trade Area comes. If we trade among ourselves, if we visit each other in tourism, let's go and see, hey, these Nigerians, they're popular people in the world. Nollywood is there. Let's go to Lagos and see how these Nigerians live, what kind of people they are, what do they eat. But we'll only be able to do that if it's a $200 ticket and not the $800 ticket that it is today. So Africans, let's promote our growth and development of each other. That is the way it will be. We'll still continue trading with our foreign partners outside of Africa, but the icing on the cake is ourselves. We develop ourselves. Let's think that. An African travel for tourism and trade. Thank you so much.
Indeed, thank you very much, DJ. But there are quite a number of comments on the chat box. Let me just pick a few, then we wrap up. Michael Mwate says, visa for Africans in Africa is a double-edged problem for business and governments. Without a structured visa policy, intra-Africa trade will remain a mirage. And then Aaron Monetsi says, our objective must be a visa-free Africa for Africans. And DG, you mentioned this. Europeans don't need visas to visit each other. So should we. No visas for Africans traveling in Africa. And then we have Tillman Gabriel says, AU 2063 SATAM African Continental Free Trade Area is a direction. Start with some, not all 54. The rest will follow over time when actual benefits are seen. As we learn from Europe, it is a continuous work project. Then we have Douglas Kip-Correll says, are there any ready-made baby steps ready to be enacted to remove African visa problems? Well, we have the case of Rwanda, if you would care. Rwanda, the visa-free policy, a visa on arrival for anyone. So that's a very typical one that we can cite there. And I think finally, we have Tillman Gabriel again saying, patience. EU started with 6 in 1958, 65 years ago, now 27 out of 42. Some waiting, some to step out, ongoing projects. And so these are some of your comments, and I would want to thank all of you for these comments and questions that you have posed. And on behalf of all of you and on my own behalf, I would want to thank our very own Capt.Gilbert Kibe for taking time to enlighten us on some aspects of the African aviation industry. And in particular, he has shown us some perspectives. We should not despair. We just need to keep persisting And we just need to keep nagging our governments and our stakeholders with facts, not just making empty. We need to go with facts, with evidence, with what has worked elsewhere, and hopefully one day and very soon they would yield to what we have been asking for, and we would find an Africa fully connected, easily mobile across borders, and we would promote the trade that we all want to see on the continent. On that note, I want to thank you once again, DG, for your time, and I wish you all the best. Have a nice day and enjoy the rest of the week. And to all our guests, I thank you and have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Rafa, Afra. I really appreciate everything. And I hope to see some of you in Kigali next week for the Aviation Africa conference. So thank you so much and God bless.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.